to move to, there was really nothing. So I knew that it was exiting, PAC. There was no role forthcoming, even in the Coca-Cola company. And so I moved to sales. That in itself, was a huge, mental shift, moving from a support function to a core function. As you know, Coca-Cola is a selling organization. And I realized that it was important, to have a growth mindset. My mantra, I had a couple of mantras, all through my career and even still serving me now. And the first one was that I determine how far I go. So when people talk about, the system is this, or the people, or the system is not allowing me to grow and what have you, as far as I was concerned, I determined how far I would go. Yes, please, I do understand that, things are very tough in an organization. There are multiple people vying for just one single position. But as far as I was concerned, the only person that could prevent me from getting to where I wanted to get to was myself. And then when I moved to sales, which was a totally different, experience for me, my mantra was, what I don't know, I would learn. Numbers that I couldn't really, that they weren't speaking in the past became things that I was speaking, and just sitting with data and having that shape, a relationship or a discussion with a customer was extremely satisfying, and it is still satisfying. And then my last mantra was that the only difference between me and the next best person is exposure. That if I get the exposure, I'll definitely be better than that person. So for me, at every stage in my career, and that I'm weaving in and out. So I did that role. I was the key accounts director for 3.5 years before I left NBC, and then now started off my coaching practice. But for me, at every turn, it was about defining what success meant for me, and also having like an annual development plan, my self-development, my career, really sitting and understanding where I was and where I wanted to get to. I used to have, and I still have, brought that into my business now. Every Monday, as much as I could, my lunch hour, I would look for a secluded place where I could just sit, reflect. At times I would pray. My faith is a very strong part of who I am. And, just really think about, how far have I gone? What else is remaining, for me? And at every point in time, when I got into a role, and that was something I learned from Bola Ojo, was what was my exit point? Where do I want to get to by the time I am leaving this role? So it was clear what I needed to work towards, what plans I needed to make. And I didn't, as far as I was concerned, when it comes to development, I have the first responsibility before my organization, before my line manager or the HR unit. My development was my responsibility, and I would invest in myself. If the programs I wanted for that I felt, enhance my career and also, position me for the next role I was looking for. If I couldn't afford it that year, I would save towards it, and then go for it the following year. So at times I would not, go for a program on an annual basis, but nothing less than 2 years. I would make sure that I have saved up, for that. If it, denying myself of certain things to make sure that I could pay for that. So for me, it was having a clear line of sight in terms of what exactly I wanted, what was my definition of success for myself, what was required, to get there. Yes, people aspire, to become the head of a function, but do you know for your organization what the competencies that are required for each leadership layer? How does the organization also measure proficiency in those competencies? And then how can you begin to take on, certain roles that perhaps maybe for your line manager or someone who is higher, how do you begin to insert yourself, into such roles and take on additional responsibility, knowing fully well where you want to end up? So I think I will stop here for a while and just we'll take questions or allow other people to share their journeys.
Well, that's already a whole hand, or what I would call a book full already, but I'm taking notes. Great. So picked a couple of things. So, for instance, you talked about self-investment, investing in self in terms of a personal development, clear line of sight in terms of where you're taking your career and all of that. And I'm sure that's talking about your individual development plan, that you always own that. You also always have a clear exit plan. That's quite interesting. So at any point you're getting into a role, into a job and all of that, you're already also thinking about what's the end, what's the exit plan, and you're working towards that. That's awesome to know. Also talked about clear self and career development. I mentioned that earlier. You also mentioned the fact that you determine how far you want to go. That's interesting. That's interesting. So it's not the organization, it's not one line manager, it's not the organization that determines. You determine how high and how far you want to fly. Well, those are really very important, salient points that I've noted. Good. We'll just park it there. A couple of questions are supposed to follow, but I know a couple of other individuals. We also have one or two questions they want to specifically ask you, but let's hold that briefly. When we get into the point for questioning, we take that in. Just to also just let us know that Ayo will be leaving this call at about 6 o'clock because he has another meeting. But I'll give him the floor now, first to speak about his career so far and also to speak to the theme for today. And when we bring in the third speaker, then we'll ask Ayo a couple of questions so that by 6 o'clock when he's leaving, we would have at least asked him a couple of picked a couple of answers from the questions that we have set for him. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Ayo. Please, it's your turn. Please just have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dakbo. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I'm going to have to leave early, but unfortunately, I had other things set up. So, talking about my career, interesting career anyway. I've done several things, but I've spent the bulk of my career in the oil and gas industry. Got in as an engineer, worked with Shell briefly, but I was a contract staff in Shell, and I was not interested in working for an organization where I could not get training and development. So after about 2 years, I actually left Shell and joined Baker Hughes. And I joined Baker Hughes at an entry level. Did my first 3 years in Wari selling technology, but I needed to get out of that. So after 3 years, moved over to Port Harcourt and continued selling technology. Started to talk to bigger companies. One of my clients of my accounts was Total. I did that for another 2 years, and then I got the opportunity to go into applications engineering, which is also an interesting part in the oil and gas industry. I did that for 2 years, and then got offered the opportunity to run a division. Then we're calling them divisions, to run a division in Baker Hughes. And I jumped at it. I jumped at it because it was an opportunity to do something different from engineering, which was to try and see the entire organization from a holistic perspective, the finance part, the sales part, and so on. But also, I jumped at it because one funny question I was asked by my boss when they were considering me into that role was, "Oh, do you think your contemporaries and your colleagues will accept your leadership?" And when you ask me a question like that, it becomes a challenge because, come on, I need to depend, right? So I said yes. I said I think they will, and they said why? I said because they come to me for engineering solutions to their problems, so I expect that they will step up. So that was one of the reasons. And I recall then I was actually thinking of going international, but I talked to my wife and said, "Listen, give me 3 years, and let's see how this turns out." So I started that, and it was an excellent role. Stretched me quite a bit. I learned to manage people. I learned to run a business, financial acumen, the strategic part of the business, building strategic plans to be able to compete in the marketplace and also gain competitive advantage. Now, it was while I was doing that, or just before I started doing that, that I stumbled on one or two things that actually helped me push my career to the limit. I was reading a book by a guy called Jim Collins. Basically, I read two of his books, Good to Great and Built to Last. And while I was reading that, I started asking myself a question. Why is it that engineers don't get to run businesses? Why is it that it's lawyers, accountants, that get to run even engineering companies? And that led me down a path of trying to understand what do I need to become a proper business leader. And one of the things that I ended up doing then was then go to do an MBA. So I was able to get an MBA with University of Liverpool, and then online programs were still in their infancy. But stepped out of my comfort zone, applied for one, got it. This was 2005. 4 million naira then. 4 million naira then was a huge amount of money. I think it was about 21,000 pounds. And the guy asked me, he said, can you afford it? And I remember I said, well, I can't, but whatever happens, I will raise the money. And I went back and talked to Baker Hughes, and Baker Hughes basically sponsored me. Now, the funny thing that happened was that because I went to Baker Hughes and I said, listen, I want to do this and I need you to sponsor me. And one of the things I told them was, listen, pay per model. If I mess up in any of the models, you can stop it. What I didn't realize then was, although I was already on the radar as a high potential, I did not realize that that particular decision actually got the organization more interested in me. Because suddenly I then got pulled into the management role, and then I was on the radar. Another thing that happened then was Baker Hughes in Nigeria went through a full reorganization, went from a divisional model to a country model. I was the only Nigerian that was running a division. So in Port Harcourt, then I just suddenly got put into the role of lead operations manager, in addition to what I was doing, and I was doing my MBA. But that helped me a lot because as I was doing the MBA, all the principles I was learning, I kept applying in my job on a day-to-day basis. And then by the time I was done with the MBA, the next thing I got was an international assignment. So went to Europe. I did Europe for about a year and a half, and then went off to the Middle East. And in the Middle East, I went from running a product line to business development for Africa. Then I started running 3 countries: Oman, Yemen, and Pakistan. I was running everything. Now, I also recall that, and so what happens then was you go from a business that was about $8 million a year in revenue to a job that there was no revenue required, it's just business development, and then you go to a business that was about $158 million of revenue in a year. And all this happened between 2008 and 2010. And I recall when I got offered that job, my boss then, who is a Saudi guy, Khalid No, said, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "It's risky, but I'm willing to do it." And he said, "Why do you think it's risky?" I said, "Well, because if I fail, you could kick me out of the organization." And that's it about career transitions, right? Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because if you are afraid to step out of your comfort zone, you will not grow. Executives are not looking for people to pamper. What it is looking for people that they can throw in at the deep end, and they expect that people will swim. It sounds mean, but it's not mean, because executives are so busy that one of their major jobs is they're constantly looking for leaders. So you've got to be ready to step out of your comfort zone. So I did that for about a year and 3 months, and then got a call one summer, 2012, and the regional president said, "Listen, I have an opportunity for you in Nigeria." Now, I knew I was going to come back to Nigeria one way or the other, but I just didn't know when. I didn't know how soon it was. And then the guy said, "I want you back in Nigeria, vice president, run Nigeria. Are you interested?" I said, "Yes, I'm interested." Because I've learned in my career, I never say no to an opportunity to grow. Because the moment you say no, trust me, you have set a glass ceiling over yourself, you will not grow. So, came back to Nigeria in 2012, took the family back to the UK, and then ran Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea. So, in fact, it was about a month after I started, I got Equatorial Guinea there to Nigeria. Ran Nigeria, and I enjoyed it. It was tough, it was hard, but I enjoyed myself. And I enjoyed myself because it was an opportunity to put some of my own ideas into practice. I'm a people person. I mentor quite a lot of people, so it was easy also for me to connect with my team. I had a team of about 400 people across Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea. One of the things I learned in my career is this: as a leader, never block your people from getting across to you. Because if they do get across, if they cannot get across to you, one, you will never know what is happening below your direct report. Number two, you will not know how to identify high potentials within your organization. Because and the HR people here will know some people that will not come across as high potential leaders in the future, potential high performers, right? Because sometimes you don't get to see them every time. It's only a snapshot, and the snapshot that you see is negative. It becomes difficult to develop them. So as a leader, what I kept doing was I'll visit the shop floor. I get up from my desk once in a while. I'll walk up to my office and I just talk to people. I just get to meet people. And that helped my own career progression, but it also helped me to get to know people. Because one of the things I learned in my career is from your first day, make your job obsolete. In other words, start to develop systems and processes and people so that when you step away from that job, there is no vacuum. When you go on vacation, nobody's calling you to say, we have a problem. How can we solve it? Right? So that was a big part for me in my career progression. So I did that for up to 2016. In 2016, I left. And I remember when I was leaving, it was a very funny time to leave because I did not plan to leave, but I could see the handwriting on the wall. And just like Olomola Adeyanju said, I mean, my faith is a big part. And I remember that I was having a conversation with God one day, and God said, listen, every time I teach you something, every time I allow you to go through a training, it is so that you can become a bigger tool in my hand for the future. So the moment I had that, I knew that everything I did was designed to glorify God. I know that everybody here are not Christians, but I just needed to put out there because you've got to have a very strong spiritual backing to be able to deal with some of the pressures that you see in your career, to be able to deal with some of the fears that we tend to experience. One thing about my career that I noticed, which I want to put out there, is the fact that, you see, a transition sometimes is not a change of job, but it could be a change of career from one industry to the other. Sometimes it could be planned by you. Sometimes it could just be foisted on you. One of the things that you must learn to do is a transition is basically change, and you must learn to deal with change. That's number one. Number two, you don't work for anybody, you work for yourself. Because the moment you think I work for Baker Hughes, I work for Coca-Cola, I work for Etihad Oilfield Services, what happens is that you get upset, you get discouraged, and then you then start to subconsciously, without knowing it, you then start to reduce what you bring to the job every day. Then you get into this vicious circle. Suddenly your performance drops, and they start to complain about your performance that is dropping, and then you get upset because they're complaining about it. Then subconsciously you lower your performance again, and then after some time you're simply not bringing value. But if you think of the fact that I work for Ayobiyi Shote Inc., I consult for Baker Hughes, I consult for Coca-Cola, I consult for Etihad Oilfield Services, the motivation to show up and do your best job every day is there because it's about you. You pay yourself, and it is what you get from your consulting that you used to pay yourself. The other thing I want to put out there that is pretty important is this. In 2016, I co-wrote a book with Brian Tracy and some other guys. I wrote just one chapter in that book, and that book was talking about success. And one of the principles I put in the book is the principles of performance and potential. And I need to mention it. A lot of us think that, I will get rewarded for the good job that I do. So because of that, I'm waiting for them to promote me. Sorry, nobody promotes you. Nobody promotes you. You get yourself promoted. And this is what I mean. You don't get promoted only on performance. You can do the same job year in, year out, and be fantastic in it. The only reward for a good job is more work. So they could basically see you as good within that role. Because there's nobody to step in, they want to leave you there. It's not because someone hates you. It's just because you have just shown that you are the best in that job. So what do? You've got to develop potential. And what is potential? Potential is the ability to show that you can do a better job than where you currently are. And there's several ways you can do, you can improve your potential. We can talk about that later because of time, because of the other teacher. But you see, one of the best ways to develop potential is identify your skill set today, identify what you need to be a better person 5 years, 10 years from now by looking at the job you want to be able to do then. Identify what's the difference in there, then identify how you improve on the skill set that you don't have. Personal development, get an MBA, do a master's program, right? Get a mentor, right? Read books, understand what great leaders do. When I made up my mind that I wanted to be a CEO, I started reading books about CEOs. I started reading Jim Collins, I started reading Malcolm Gladwell, I started reading books that enables me to think, not make me narrow-minded. Funny enough, I started reading the book of Proverbs because the book of Proverbs for me is one of the best business books in the entire world. If you don't believe me, whichever religion you are, take the book of Proverbs alone and just try to read it. You will learn quite a lot from there. So that is my journey. And one or two things I put out there is some of the things that I've done within my career. The last thing I'm going to say before I hand over to Dapo is this: I never intend to retire. For as long as I'm alive on the face of the earth, I'm going to be doing something. That mentoring somebody, learning how to trade forex, teaching people how to do fantastic things, becoming an executive coach. I'm just going to keep doing something because there's so much that God has packed into you in your career that you need to make sure you keep putting out there. Because if you don't teach people, if you don't mentor people, you get too full, you'll not be able to learn something new. Thank you very much.
Wow. Ayo, please, I just want to say this. It's so unfortunate that you have to leave early to get into another meeting. We do understand, but I'd like to just begin to make a request for a comeback very soon. We'll
Not
have
a
to bring
problem.
you back. Yes, we'll have to bring you back because I know there's just so much that you would like to just put. There's so much on the table already. I've already taken. So I won't go through all of what I've noted here, but please, we'll have to bring you back very soon, very soon. So look
Definitely.
for every time when you have enough time, and we'll bring you back in here. But thank you
All
so
right.
much for sharing just so much in a very little time. I just want to say one or two things that are very, very germane that you talked about. One is make your job obsolete. Just make your job obsolete. Otherwise, you just continue to be on that job. So make your job, make yourself obsolete. And then you also talk about the fact that you work for yourself. So I've heard this notion of this yeah, because people say yes, I work for this organization. That's the truth. That's the organization that hires you. But again, I tell people you work for your manager, your line manager. He determines your performance. He does so. But I'm getting a new dimension today for the fact that you work for yourself. You really need to set the standard. You really need to put the performance level you want to achieve. You really need to just be sure, be clear that you are a consultant, no matter the role, no matter the organization. Very, very interesting. I also love the fact where you talk about people. So growing people, you have a responsibility to grow your team, to grow people, to invest in yourself, and of course, you talked about the God factor. So many things noted here. And reading, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know you will have to probably leave in a couple of minutes, but just one question before you go. Mr. Adeoba, I'm very sorry. We'll still coming back to you shortly, but just before Ayo steps out, just one question. There are about 8 or 9 questions that we wanted Ayo to answer, but unfortunately, he would have to leave at this point. I think one of the questions I would like you to speak to is where someone asked about, sorry, just a minute. Let me look at that question. Yes, you talked about risk, and there's a question that talked about. You say we often hear people talking about taking chances and risk in life and in career. How do you balance the desire to take risk and stability of staying safe on your career journey? I think that's an interesting question I would like you to talk about, because you just hit on that question of you got to step out, you need to take risk. So where do you cut that balance? Especially when you remember there's a family at home, I need to bring food to the table and all of that. Please,
Okay.
let's hear your perspective.
Okay, so extremely interesting. That's an interesting question. I thank you that you brought that up. And I'm going to try. I'll give you 5 minutes, so I'll leave at 6:05. So that way
Awesome.
we can take one or two more questions. Let me twist the question around and say, what if you stay in your job and you don't develop and you still get fired? What happens? Right? Because some of the, and it's important, yes, for us to consider the family, right? Because if we don't have a job, if there's no revenue, then the family will suffer. That's important. But that should be what should then drive us to always be on the lookout for something better. That's number one. Number two, because we a lot of us are at a level in our organizations where we have leaders thinking for us. We make the fundamental mistake of not learning strategic skills or learning to be strategically agile. What do I mean by that? Strategy is different from tactics. What a lot of us do today on the job is tactical. We're basically carrying out tasks based on plans that somebody has given us, right? And tactical activities are so easy because it does not drive us to have responsibility, right? And what I'm trying to say is that you as a manager, tell somebody to go and do something goes wrong while the person is doing it. More often than not, the person tells you, "Oh, it's not my fault. I don't know what happened. It is what you told me to do that I did." Now, when you hear that, it tells you that that person is not strategic at all, right? A strategic employee is somebody that takes whatever you've told them to do, right? Either they did it the way you told them to do it, but they knew why they needed to do it. And if something goes wrong, they can step up and say, "Listen, I did everything you told me to do, but I think I made a mistake somewhere or something went wrong because of this," because they are already thinking of the ability to correct it if something goes wrong. That's more strategic. So if I take that back to your question, every single person on this call, you must know where you want to be 10 years from today. You must know whether you want to be in your organization or you want to be in another organization. You must know the impact of technology on your career today. When you know all that, it becomes easy for you to manage risk. There's a risk in everything, but for every career move you want to make, right, either within your current organization or to another organization, you must carry out a risk assessment. And the risk assessment is simple. This is what I'm doing here today. This is how much I'm loved here today. This is what I'm earning today. I see an opportunity here. What if I get there and I don't do a good job? Or what if I get there and it's harder than I expect? What am I going to do? It's not about why should I leave. It's about what am I going to do when I get there? What skills do I need to develop so that when I get there, I can manage the uncertainty? Because when you go to every new place, there's an uncertainty. The other part of the conversation is this: if I get there and yes, I didn't realize that that is the wrong place for me to be, what do I do? In most cases, you don't cry about spilled milk. You look forward and say, "Okay, fine. How much can I stand this place until I get something better?" Now, you could do your risk assessment and then realize that you want to be where you currently are. You don't want to move. All well and good. But then you've got to make sure you don't remain in the same role. So your next step in your risk assessment then will be, what do I need to do in this current role, in this current organization, to show them that I have the potential to do something better? It's all about you. All of us are selling ourselves. So if you don't learn the skill to sell yourself the proper way, not office politics, not stabbing people in the back, but showing that you have the skill set, or you are learning new skill sets, you will not grow. That's the way I answer that question. There's somebody's mic that is open. Please, if you can mute your mic so that everybody can hear.
Good place to just park this. This is a good place to pack this, like I've said earlier. So I will still got about 8 other questions for you. I'm just going to put them in the locker and lock it up. When we
Okay.
bring it back, we'll bring it out from where we are keeping this. But I know you'll be stepping out in a minute. I've seen somebody putting up his hand repeatedly while you were speaking. I don't know whether it's a question he has specific for you, but because we have to let you go, Ishijola Ajiboye, if you have a question for Ayo that is specific for him, you could just type it in, and then we'll take it and probably pass it on to him. And when he comes back, he will talk about that. But I want to just truly say thank you for your time. I'm conscious of the fact that it's 6:03 or thereabouts already. But very soon we're going to have to bring you back. We want to have to bring
I
you
look
back.
forward to it. I look forward to it. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for having me.
Thank you so much. It's been
Thank you.
awesome having you. Great.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging in there. I